If you're enjoying my channel, then please press the subscribe button to show your appreciation. Thank you. Israel must never forget the atrocities, massacre, and murders that Hamas and its militants committed on Israeli soil on October 7, 2023, and must never have a repeat of it ever again. Now, the land of Israel, the Holy Land, belongs only to the children of Israel, which are known as the Jews. Now, in the very first verse in the Jewish Torah, in the beginning God created the heaven and the earth. So God can do whatever he wants to do with Mother's earth. The Muslims believe in their Torah, in the Quran, the Quran, not the Torah, the Quran, and they believe exactly what Muhammad said. And Muhammad said that the Torah was sent down by Allah, the Torah and the Gospel. So we have to take heed what the Jewish Torah is saying to us. Muslims believe the Quran, so we as well believe in the Torah and our holy scriptures. On today's map, the land that God has given to Israel, stated in the Torah and in the Holy Bible, include everything modern-day Israel possesses, plus all the territory occupied by the Palestinians, the West Bank and Gaza, plus some of Egypt and Syria, plus all of Jordan. According to the book of Genesis chapter 15 verse 18 and Joshua chapter 1 verse 4, the land that God, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and of Jacob, gave to Israel include everything from the Nile River in Egypt to Lebanon. The land of Israel is a God-given inheritance of the Jewish people based on the Holy Torah and the Holy Bible, particularly the books of Genesis, Exodus, Joshua, Numbers, and so forth. For the Lord will not forsake his people for his great name's sake, because it has pleased the Lord to make you, the Jewish people, the Israelites, his people. 1 Samuel chapter 12 and verse 22. Nothing can change this preeminent fact. Israel is entitled to the land it has and has been for over 3,000 years. In reality, the Jewish people maintain ties to their historic homeland for more than 3,700 years. God gave this land of Israel to Abraham and to his descendants through Isaac and Jacob, which means the land belongs to the descendants of Jacob, whose name was changed by God to Israel. In other words, the land belongs to the children of Israel, referred to in the New Testament as the Jews, Romans 1:16. And you will find the promise of Abraham and Jacob in Genesis 26, Genesis 28. The Israelis had many military conflicts fought between various Arab countries in 1948 to 49, 1956, 1967, 1973, 1982, 2006. And up till now, they're still fighting for survival. The first war, 1948 to 1949, began when Israel declared itself an independent state following the United Nations partition of Palestine and 5 Arab countries, Egypt, Iraq, Jordan, Lebanon, and Syria, they all attacked Israel, but Israel was victorious. Then the Six-Day War, June 1967, fought between Israel and the Arab neighbors, Egypt, Syria, and Jordan. They all attacked Israel. Iraq, Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, Algeria, and others also contributed troops and arms to the Arab forces, but Israel again was victorious. Then the Yom Kippur War on October 6 to 26, 1973. This time Egypt and Syria attacked Israel. Again, Israel was triumphant. Now, enough is enough. Israel has to put a stop and an end to all threats and wars that they have been encountered ever since 1948 in their own homeland. And no country should ever blame them in doing so.
Ladies and gentlemen, the curse of October 7th began when Hamas invaded Israel from Gaza, but it didn't end there. Israel was soon forced to defend itself on 6 more war fronts organized by Iran. On October 8th, Hezbollah attacked us from Lebanon. Since then, they fired over 8,000 rockets at our towns and cities, at our civilians, at our children. 2 weeks later, the Iran-backed Houthis in Yemen launched drones and missiles at Israel, the first of 250 such attacks, including one yesterday aimed at Tel Aviv. Iran's Shiite militias in Syria and Iraq have targeted Israel dozens of times over the past year as well. Fueled by Iran, Palestinian terrorists in Judea and Samaria perpetrated scores of attacks there and throughout Israel. And last April, for the first time ever, Iran directly attacked Israel from its own territory, firing 300 drones, cruise missiles, and ballistic missiles at us. I have a message for the tyrants of Tehran. If you strike us, we will strike you. There is no place in Iran that the long arm of Israel cannot reach. And that's true of the entire Middle East. Far from being lambs led to the slaughter, Israel's soldiers have fought back with incredible courage and with heroic sacrifice. And I have another message for this assembly and for the world outside this hall. We are winning. Because Iran's aggression, if it's not checked, will endanger every single country in the Middle East and many, many countries in the rest of the world. Because Iran seeks to impose its radicalism well beyond the Middle East. That's why it funds terror networks on 5 continents. That's why it builds ballistic missiles for nuclear warheads to threaten the entire world. For too long, the world has appeased Iran. It turns a blind eye to its internal repression. It turns a blind eye to its external aggression. Well, that appeasement must end. And that appeasement must end now.
Can a pocket
Nations of the world should support the brave people of Iran who want to rid themselves of this evil regime. Responsible governments should not only support Israel in rolling back Iran's aggression, they should join Israel. They should join Israel in stopping Iran's nuclear weapons program. In this body, in the Security Council, we're going to have a deliberation in a few months. And I call on the Security Council to snap back UN Security Council sanctions against Iran, because we must all do everything in our power to ensure that Iran never gets nuclear weapons. For decades, I've been warning the world against Iran's nuclear program. Our actions delayed this program by perhaps a decade, but we haven't stopped it. We've delayed it, but we haven't stopped it. Iran now seeks to weaponize its nuclear program for the sake of the peace and security of all your countries, for the sake of the peace and security of the entire world. We must not let that happen. And I assure you, Israel will do everything in its power to make sure it doesn't happen. Just imagine, for those who say, well, Hamas has to stay, it has to be part of a post-war Gaza, imagine in a post-war situation in World War II, imagine allowing the defeated Nazis in 1945 to rebuild Germany. It's inconceivable. It's ridiculous. It didn't happen then. It's not going to happen now. This is why Israel will reject any rule for Hamas in a post-war Gaza. We don't seek to resettle Gaza. What we seek is a demilitarized and de-radicalized Gaza. Only then can we ensure that this round of fighting will be the last round of fighting. We are ready to work with regional and other partners to support a local civilian administration in Gaza committed to peaceful coexistence. As for the hostages, I have a message for the Hamas captors. Let them go. Let them go. All of them. Those alive today must be returned alive, and the remains of those whom you brutally killed must be returned to their families. Those families here with us today, and others in Israel, deserve to have a resting place for their loved ones, a place where they can grieve and remember them. This war, ladies and gentlemen, this war can come to an end now. All that has to happen is for Hamas to surrender, lay down its arms, and release all the hostages. But if they don't, we will fight until we achieve victory, total victory. There is no substitute for it. Israel must also defeat Hezbollah in Lebanon. Hezbollah is the quintessential terror organization in the world today. It has tentacles that span in all continents. It has murdered more Americans and more Frenchmen than any group except bin Laden. It's murdered the citizens of many countries represented in this room. And it has attacked Israel viciously over the last 20 years. In the last year, completely unprovoked. A day after Hamas massacre on October 7th, Hezbollah began attacks against Israel, which forced more than 60,000 Israelis on our northern border to leave their homes, becoming refugees in their own land. Hezbollah turned vibrant towns in the north of Israel into ghost towns. So I want you to think about this in equivalent American terms. Just imagine if terrorists turned El Paso and San Diego into ghost towns. Then ask yourself, how long would the American government tolerate that? A day? A week? A month? I doubt they tolerate it even for a single day. Yet Israel has been tolerating this intolerable situation for nearly a year. Well, I've come here today to say, enough is enough. We won't rest until our citizens can return safely to their homes. We will not accept a terror army perched on our northern border, able to perpetrate another October 7th style massacre. For 18 years, Hezbollah brazenly refused to implement UN Security Council Resolution 1701, which requires it to move its forces away from our borders. Instead, Hezbollah moved right up to our border. They secretly dug terror tunnels to infiltrate our communities and indiscriminately fired thousands of rockets into our towns and villages. They fire these rockets and missiles not from military sites, not from that. They do that too. But they fire those rockets and missiles after they place them in schools, in hospitals, in apartment buildings, and in the private homes of the citizens of Lebanon. They endanger their own people. They put a missile in every kitchen, a rocket in every garage. I said to the people of Lebanon this week, get out of the death trap that Hezbollah has put you in. Don't let Nasrallah drag Lebanon into the abyss. We're not at war with you. We're at war with Hezbollah, which has hijacked your country and threatens to destroy ours. As long as Hezbollah chooses the path of war, Israel has no choice, and Israel has every right to remove this threat and return our citizens to their homes safely. And that's exactly what we're doing.
Now, I would like the world to look at these two journalists. They're very inexperienced in journalism, and they have no experience, and especially Seng Uga, jumping around all the time like a kangaroo, but he is brainless. You have sometimes education can make a fool more foolish. And this guy looked very foolish to me. That is why no one is taking him on. He is threatening, both of them, journalists, Israel indirectly, what is coming next to Israel with Iran and Hezbollah. I would like the world to listen exactly. I have two segments with him. I have one after the death of Hassan Nasrallah.
Yeah, and the U.S. backing them and providing them with weapons, which is also part of the reason why the retaliation that you'll see from both Hezbollah and a country like Iran, which has, in my opinion, even more of a military capacity and capability. The reason why those retaliations are so weak is because they don't want this to escalate into a broader regional war.
That's the most important point,
Okay.
guys. Because now when you look at what's coming next is not going to be fake. What Hezbollah and Iran are going to do next is going to be very real, okay? So you can tell the difference between fake and real based on the statements that they put out there, how America responds to it, how security experts respond to it. When they're doing the fake strikes, America goes, whew, America goes, oh, that was not bad. Okay, good. They're not escalating. America will say that, right? And then they'll turn to Israel and say, please don't escalate. Please don't escalate. And Israel will go and spit right in the face of the American representative and escalate 6 times over. So, guys, the most important strike out of all of those was the pager strike. Why? I mean, I just listed you a huge list, let alone the endless ineffective rockets by Hezbollah. The reason that's what the most important is right before then, Israel had a decision to make that they pushed off for as long as humanly possible. Are you going to sign the ceasefire or are you not? Because if they sign the ceasefire, then Hezbollah and Iran don't even Iran's still waiting to retaliate for another strike that Israel did in Tehran and an assassination there, right? So Iran has not done a major retaliation. They tried one where they.
I hope Iran is learning their lesson and always remember Gaza and what is happening right now to Hezbollah.
Still Tehran and an assassination there, right? So Iran has not done a major retaliation. They tried one where they were like, wink, wink, we are coming. Here's our drones. That was a purposely ineffective one because they didn't want to escalate. So now, when the pager thing happened, and you heard Nasrallah say it there, it crossed all red lines. That is Israel declaring war. We are not going to do a ceasefire. We are not going to do a peace deal. We're just going to invade you. We're going to do endless bombings. And now the last part, Anna, not only it wasn't just your words. The Israeli spokespeople said, our ground troops have not crossed into Lebanon yet.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay, so look, guys, if you're Israeli, you're not going to listen to any of this. You're going to say, they're savage terrorist Muslims that are firing rockets at us all the time. They're pea shooters, they're slingshots, but I don't care. I hate them. They're guilty by definition, right? But for the rest of us, there's no question that Israel is trying to agitate for a much larger war. They have done endless, significant strikes. And by the way, I didn't even get into Damascus. 3 foreign capitals they have attacked recently.
Yep.
And no matter how overwhelming the evidence is, the minute that Hezbollah or Iran retaliates in a real way, you notice they keep throwing rockets and America doesn't really care that much because, as I said, it doesn't work and everybody knows it's not going to work. But if they have a real retaliatory strike, and I don't know that they do, and they launch it, all of American media and the American government will flip in a minute and pretend that poor Israel got attacked for no reason. Oh my God, these bloodthirsty, savage, violent Muslims.
I need to understand, okay, so if you do support what the current Israeli government is doing by escalating this new front in this war, what is the end goal? Like, what are they trying to accomplish here? I know what they're saying they're trying to accomplish. We want Israelis to be able to go back to their homes. Hezbollah is a problem. Okay, so are they going to level Lebanon?
Yeah.
Like how okay, are they really? They're going to do that too?
Yeah.
This is a disaster.
Okay, so
of epic proportions.
Now, look, everything we just told you.
Do they think that they're going to be safer in that part of the world after they do that?
Some of them do, yeah. Okay,
well, they're wrong.
Well, of course they're wrong.
Now, I would like the world to listen to another 5 minutes with Senk Ugar. He is comparing Benjamin Netanyahu to Hassan Nasrallah, that Netanyahu has committed more crime than Hassan Nasrallah. But he has to realize, this young journalist, no experience, he just blah, blah, blah with his mouth and think that he is a very smart guy, but he's very stupid. He is not bright. He's not a bright guy. He just talks and talks and talks, and he doesn't have wisdom or using wisdom when he's speaking. You cannot compare Hassan Nasrallah. He was a theorist, and a theorist don't have law and order. Remember that Israel is a democratic state, and they adhere to international laws. You are in America, don't you adhere to the laws of America? If you're driving your car and you run a stoplight, and the cops stop you, you have to adhere, you have to stop. But these terrorists, they have no respect. They are terrorists. They don't take wrong. They're always right. So you cannot compare, and then you're talking about genocide. Hamas and its militants using Gaza civilians as human shield. They have them in schools, they have them in mosques, they have them in hospitals, in houses, under the tunnels, in tunnels, and they use them as human shield. And they are attacking Israel. So what do you expect Israelis to do? What do you expect them to do? They attacked them on October the 7th. Hezbollah attacked them on October 8th. What do you expect the Israelis to do? To put their hands behind their back? Hezbollah and you and the rest that follow after you and Hamas to be blamed for all the death in Gaza. The United Nations are also to be blamed because you are one-sided and you cannot see further than your nose. The United Nations, they also to be blamed. They can't be one-sided. Look at this visit with Benjamin Netanyahu in New York. All those who walk out from that building, you check them out. They follow you and you follow them. For you to be a good journalist, you cannot be one-sided. Speak the truth. Give wrong, and right. Don't be one-sided. You are blind now. I hope your eyes open. Learn the history of Israel and know what is Palestine. Know if they are really Palestinians or Arabs, and who are the ones to inherit the land of Israel. Please check it out.
All right, breaking news. Hezbollah has confirmed that in the strikes that Israel did on Friday in Beirut, they did in fact kill Hassan Nasrallah. He is the leader of Hezbollah, has been the leader of Hezbollah since 1992. So, of course, the Israelis celebrate. What should we think about the death of Hassan Nasrallah, and what was wrong with him, and what should they do instead? Anyone who's resisting the occupation, the brutal, tyrannical, racist occupation of the Palestinians. So I have suggestions on all of that. So look, guys, as you know, our show's live weekdays, 6 to 8 p.m. Make sure you're checking it out live, and we'll have way more details on Monday. But I wanted to give you an update here as I do in the weekends. And please become a member and support honest programming here. As I'm going to be very honest with you here. And of course, in American media, that's usually not allowed. But I'm going to give you nuance here. And so was Nasrallah a bad guy? In a lot of ways, of course he was. And he was also a complicated guy. Now, there are people who will tell you, no, the world is black and white. And anyone we declare a terrorist, especially if they're Muslim, there's nothing complicated about them. They should be murdered at any time by the Israelis or the Americans, and they deserve it. And that's the end of the story. And they were doing it for no reason at all. They were just doing it because they hate America or Israel or Jews. That's obviously comically wrong. And people who say things like that, they're telling on themselves. They're saying either I'm giving you super simplistic propaganda on purpose, or I'm just a simple person. I don't understand complicated issues at all. So why is Nasrallah complicated? So here is massive downsides, in my opinion. Number one, when you go to attack Israel violently, civilians are going to get killed.
I condemn it when Israel does it. I condemn it when Hezbollah does it. So that is an enormous mark against someone. So is it true that Netanyahu has killed so many more civilians than Hassan Nasrallah? Yes, it's not even close. Netanyahu wins that terrorist competition by a long shot. I know the Israelis still say comically and tragically that when they drop a 2,000-pound bomb in a residential area, they don't intend to kill the civilians underneath that bomb. If you believe that, you're probably an Israeli or a U.S. politician, or you work in mainstream media and can't tell what's true at all. And your job is to lie to your viewers and your readers, etc. Yeah, no, when you drop a 2,000-pound bomb on civilians, you intend to kill civilians. Israel didn't accidentally kill over 30,000 civilians in Gaza. They did it on purpose. Those things are obvious. It's not like, oh, the bomb slipped out of the plane again for the 10,000th time in a row.
Now, you idiot, I call you an idiot, nothing less than that. Israel is abiding with international laws. Terrorists know nothing about international laws. Diplomacy doesn't work for terrorists. It doesn't work at all. So what are you talking about? Training as a journalist and just jump around and you're shooting a lot of garbage. That is why I'm taking you on. Or else I will just leave you to be an idiot until God take you to your grave or something. You cannot be one-sided. Is Israel dropping these bombs deliberately to kill civilians? Civilians know, they know that these terrorists are there. Get out if you want to live. Get out. March all in the streets of Lebanon and get rid of Hezbollah and have a good government so you can have a democratic country. Why don't you think so? Yuga, go and advise them there in Lebanon or go to Gaza. Why just sit in America and shoot just garbage? You're supposed to have a good insight and bring the truth out. Give wrong, wrong, and right, right. Hezbollah is doing likewise as Hamas, hiding between civilians. Have your bombs and missiles in the homes and garage of civilians. What do you expect the IDF to do? To sit back and have another massacre and murder again in Israel with Hezbollah, like what happened on October the 7th, 2023? Don't you think that the Israeli care for the people, their citizens? I don't think that you guys care a damn about them. They are not killing civilians deliberately. They are caught in crossfire. For you to be a good journalist, you have to come out with facts. Do a lot of research. You have a young brain, and you don't have wisdom. You have education. Even I don't think you have good knowledge, much less wisdom.
So now that doesn't make what Nasrallah did any better in that regard. So there's a second giant problem with Nasrallah. He's a fundamentalist. And as anyone who watches the Young Turks knows, I can't stand fundamentalists. He, spoken favorably about the fatwa on Salman Rushdie for just writing a novel. Oh, I hate that. any kind of violence against civilians because you disagree with their ideas or they have offended you in some way. It's outrageous. It's so I did not like that about Nasrallah at all. By the way, of course, again, Israel says if you say things against our occupation or you resist our occupation in any way, we get to kill you. So, and by the way, there is no, as we're going to get into in a second, for the Israelis, there is no legitimate way to resist their occupation.
Now again, I want the world to look at these two defenders of Hamas and Hezbollah and how one-sided these two journalists are.
Said was interesting. So you can see that Hezbollah on October the 8th, the day after Israel suffers its most horrific attack on its people since the Holocaust, something which, if you extrapolated it to the population of America, is like 30 or 40 9/11s, that the very next day, Hezbollah decides to launch a rocket attack on Israel. In what possible world is that something that you would not expect Israel to defend extremely aggressively, given they've just endured this appalling terrorist attack?
I mean, Piers, I can't believe you just called it a Holocaust. That's actually offensive to
I
the
didn't call it.
Holocaust.
I called.
We can talk about.
No, sorry, don't
you said the
misquote
worst
me.
attack
Hang
since the
on, Ronnie.
Holocaust. That's
To be clear,
offensive to the Holocaust.
I said it was the worst attack on people of Jewish faith since the Holocaust of the Second World War. That's what I said.
She defends it. She defends it. She
That's
thinks
what I
it was
said.
a
Just to
good
be clear,
thing, October
that was
7th.
what I said.
Yeah.
So my point, though, is you accept that Hezbollah launched these rockets literally hours after Israel has suffered this heinous terrorist attack. You know, of course they're going to defend themselves. Why wouldn't they? Any country in the world in that situation would defend itself. And it wasn't an attack.
Well, I'd like to ask you, at what point do Arabs get the right to defend themselves? At what point does our security matter? Israel has spent the last almost 12 months carrying out a genocide in Gaza. They've killed over 41,000 people, and we all know that's a huge underestimate. Over 16,000
started
children.
that one?
Just
Who
today,
started that
Israel
war?
has killed
Who started
300
that
Lebanese
war?
people, including 21
Who
Lebanese
started that
children.
war?
At what point do we get to defend ourselves? And Alan, come on, Israel's been
Stop-
massacring and
stop firing
occupying and
rockets,
terrorizing
and
its neighbors for the past 76 years. Israel needs to stop terrorizing its neighbors, stop being an apartheid settler colony,
If you left
and maybe its
Israel
neighbors
alone,
won't fire at it
if you
because
left
its
Israel
neighbors
alone,
are defending themselves
Israel
Okay.
would
against
be
an
no
invading
All right, let
and
me bring in-
occupying
okay.
state.
Let me bring in Gideon to be waiting very patiently. Gideon Levy from Haaretz.
Yeah.
Gideon, you've heard both sides here expressed very forcefully. What is your overview of where we are now? Because it seems from where we are, I'm currently in London, but it seems to the outside world that Israel is basically ramping up for a full-fledged war with Hezbollah in Lebanon at the same time that it's still conducting a full-fledged war with Hamas in Gaza.
Absolutely. You see, the main problem is that under the excuse or under the umbrella of self-defense, which in many cases is justified, Israel thinks that it has the right to do whatever it wants. The 7th of October enabled Israel to go wild in Gaza, to cross any possible legal or moral border, and to kill 41,000 people. Why? Because of the 7th of October. After the 7th of October, we have the right to do whatever we want, and nobody will tell you, you heard the propaganda of the ambassador. Same now with Hezbollah. Hezbollah launched rockets on Israel. We have to defend itself. Until here, very well. But because we are defending ourselves, we have the right to do whatever we want. For example, the devices, for example, to kill today almost 300 people in one day. Is there a limit? I would like just to ask you one thing, Piers, and please answer with honesty.
Yeah.
If Hezbollah would have spread those devices in Israel to soldiers and hundreds of people would have got blind out of it, How would the world react after it? What would you say about those terrorists, about those monsters who do such things? Why, when Israel is doing, it's always justified. Whatever it does, it's always justified by self-defense.
Well, I would say, okay, I would say, let me give my response, Alan. I mean, my response to that would be, as I said to the ambassador, there are very serious concerns about whether that was legal, first of all. But secondly, as we just heard from Rania, when Hezbollah chose on October the 8th, when Israel was on its knees from this appalling, a monstrous terror attack on its people, with 1,200 people slaughtered, nearly 7,000 more wounded, many of them irreparably for the rest of their lives with terrible injuries. When Hezbollah decided their response to that, before Israel had done anything, was to fire a lot of rockets in solidarity with these terrorists into Israel, then in that moment they made a calculation, and Israel was always going to respond, as Hamas knew it would respond to what they did on October the 7th. And the question for me has always been proportionality. You know, what is proportional? I don't have the answer, but I've asked everybody I can that question, because it seems to me that is at the heart of this. Israel has a right to defend itself, but at what level? So just, Alan, I'll come to you in a second, but Gideon, you know, that is my honest answer. You know, I think you raise a very good point, which I'll put to Alan in a moment. But if this had been an attack on 3,000 people in Israel, or say 95% were IDF, blinding and wounding and killing a lot of them, I think there would have been a lot of global outrage. Yes, I do. But that depends how you categorize Hezbollah against the IDF. And maybe I can come to Alan for that. I mean, Alan, it's a good question from Gideon, isn't it? I mean, if it was the other way round, what would you have said?
Well, first, the legal issue is clear. You are allowed to attack an Israeli soldier while he's sleeping or while he's shopping, as long as it doesn't create a disproportionate impact on civilian population.
So you would have found that, just to be clear, it's important, Alan. It's important.
Legally.
To be clear,
legally.
From a legal point of view, you would have had no argument if Hezbollah had done that to 3,000 members of the IDF in Israel.
Israeli soldiers, yes. Now, to get one soldier, you can't kill 3 children. To get a commander, you can kill 2 or 3 civilians. There is an answer to the proportionality. We look at history. We look at what America did in Afghanistan and Iraq. We look at what Great Britain did, what France did, and we have a history of proportionality. And so, yes, the answer is that if a person is a combatant, it doesn't matter whether they're sleeping, whether they're cooks, or whether they're machine gun operators. If they're a combatant, they're a target. Once they are a target, you have to make sure that when you kill them or wound them, you're not creating disproportionate impact on civilians. What happened with the events last week is that many combatants were killed, and a teeny number of non-combatants were killed. It was the best example of proportionality in the history of modern warfare.
Why is it, Alan? Why is the United Nations High Commissioner for Human Rights saying that what happened?
It's very simple.
What happened was a war crime.
Because Abba Eban said many years ago, if the United Nations introduced a resolution that the earth was flat and that Israel would flatten it, it would win 144 to 22 with 43 abstentions. That's been the history of the United Nations. It's been the history of left-wing academics. It's the history of your Lebanese person here who says the original sin of Israel, that it can never be forgiven for, is creating a Jewish state in the midst of an Arab country. It's 1948 that she is complaining about.
Okay.
She says the original crime was 1948.
Yes. I'm going to bring Ronnie back in a moment.
Is
Gideon,
acceptable.
Let me get Gideon's response to what Alan just said, please.
Yeah, thank you. I really feel an overdose of propaganda. First the ambassador and then Ellen. You see, Israel.
Now, this guy here, where the arrow is pointing, his name is Gideon Levy. And you can see the hatred for Jews in his heart. And listen to the threats, what he is also making with Israel. A lot of hatred, both of them. This is Rana. And this one here is Gideon Levi. The hate for Israel. Listen what comes out from his mouth. And he doesn't realize he's brainless also, and he cannot see further than his nose, comparing how many children died. He is just a fool also. He cannot see and realize that Hamas using all these Gazans for human shield in hospitals, in houses, in mosques, in schools, in the tunnels, and they're firing, attacking Israel. They are caught in crossfire. The fault is Hamas and its militants and their own people. Come on. Don't be biased and one-sided and put the blame on Israel. Put the blame upon your people. Come on.
Israel will always stick to the fact that it is the victim. Whatever happens, Israel is the victim. 41,000 people killed in Gaza, and this is
how many of them are
proportional.
combatants?
How can
Wait a minute. How many?
Just a second.
How many of the 41,000 are
major-
civilians? How many are
I'll tell you
combatants?
exactly.
You haven't mentioned. Yeah, I'll tell you exactly.
I'll tell you. No, but let me first
But
answer.
don't say
17,000 of
what?
17,000 of them were
17,000
children. Children
are
are
combatants.
innocent.
Okay.
Always, always,
Okay,
always.
so let's-
If you can live in
let's
peace,
look at those
if you
figures.
can live in peace. No, let me finish now. I didn't interrupt
Yes,
you. If you
yes,
can
I
live
can
in
live in
peace
peace with
with.
that.
No, let me finish. I didn't interrupt you. Let others talk.
Now, if the world would have protested at the very beginning of the Gazan war, Gazan-Israeli war, for Hamas to let those hostages go and put their weapons down, we wouldn't have all this disaster, what took place now in Gaza. Where were you? Why didn't you lead the protesters around the world? Come out and speak. And let them march for Hamas to release all the hostages and put their weapons down, especially the United Nations. Why are you criticizing Israel for what has happened in Gaza? Hamas has started the war. What do you expect? For Israel to stop and then Hamas continue? Look how many years Israel withdrew from Gaza. What Hamas have done on the people of Gaza.
If you can live in peace with 17,000 children, you have a problem. I cannot live in peace with 17,000 children.
You
Cannot live with it in peace.
point.
But let me finish.
You
no,
said seven.
no,
17,000
Your turn will
combatants were
come.
killed. 17,000
No, 17,000 children.
Isn't the
Hamas
point?
members
Okay, let me
were-
interrupt
No,
here
no,
because
let's
you're
talk about
talking
the
over each
combatants
other.
now.
No, don't talk over each other.
Let me finish.
Here's the point I would make,
But
Gideon.
I would like.
Finish your point,
Yes,
Gideon,
I
then
would
I'm going
like
to say
to
something.
take it. Yes.
Finish your
Let
point,
me
Gideon.
take it. Yes. I want just to raise another point because it is important. We are after 1 year in Gaza, which was a catastrophe for all parties. Israel achieved nothing in this war. Israel's position today in any parameter is much worse than before this war. You name it.
What should they have done?
Security, economically,
What should they have
it's
done?
a pariah
Lay
state.
down their arms? What
Just
should they have done?
let me finish.
Sing Kumbaya with Hamas?
Now Israel is aiming to do the very same thing in Lebanon, not learning one lesson.
Let them
But
stop
Israel's
firing.
okay.
everything.
Israel's response would be that no, actually, we have managed to massively dismantle Hamas's ability to
Yeah.
operate as
Yeah.
terrorists. We've
Yeah.
destroyed many of the
We'll
tunnels.
meet you in 2
We've
years.
killed
Let's
thousands
meet
of
in 2
terrorists.
years and we'll see.
Well,
Yeah,
okay, but
yeah.
I'm just
Let's
saying
meet
what they're.
in 2 years.
I'm saying what
and
their
we will
argument.
see what we
I'm saying what their
dismantled
argument
and
is.
what we created.
I'm saying what
But
their
the
argument.
same is
What their
going on.
argument would be. Rania, over to you.
Yeah, but I will
Well, I
answer
just
to
wanna
this
point
argument.
out to what
Let's
you just
meet in
said.
2 years.
Okay, we'll do that. Rania.
Well, I just want to answer to what Piers just said about Israel dismantling. When you talk about these groups that you call terrorist organizations, you call Hamas terrorists, Hezbollah terrorists. Alan says Israel's just surrounded from everywhere. Everybody hates them, and they're always throwing rockets at them. Where do these groups come from?
You don't think
Take
they're
Hezbollah,
terrorists?
for example.
You don't think
Okay,
they're
Alan,
terrorists?
seriously? You make it so impossible to come on this program. Let me finish my point. You get to talk 5 minutes uninterrupted, and let me have my moment to talk. And then you can accuse me of all kinds of things, okay? Let's talk about where Hezbollah comes from. Hezbollah emerged, it's Lebanese people, who emerged in the mid-1980s because Israel viciously invaded and occupied Lebanon. I mean, that invasion and occupation was so horrific. Ronald Reagan called up the
For no
Israeli
good
Prime
reason.
Minister
For
Menachem
no
Begin
good
at the
reason,
time
right?
and told him to stop carrying out what Ronald Reagan referred to as a Holocaust on Beirut. That is how vicious the Israeli invasion and occupation was. And under those conditions emerged a group of Lebanese people who picked up arms to defend their homes and land from occupation, and that's how you get Hezbollah. And they kicked the Israelis out in 2000. And since
just
then, they have been
total
seen by many
nonsense.
Lebanese. You don't have to agree with it. I'm telling you the reality of the situation. I live in Lebanon. I know. Since then, they have been seen by many Lebanese as a force of protection against further Israeli invasions of Lebanon. And I'll
If
also
they were a
remind you,
vote, they'd be
Hezbollah
thrown
has
out.
never invaded Israel. Israel has repeatedly invaded Lebanon. The same goes for Hamas, by the way. Where did Hamas
They
come
haven't
from?
sent rockets?
Hamas is a group of Palestinians who picked up arms to defend their people against Israeli aggression. So if you want the aggression against Israel to stop, if you can even call it aggression, if you want that to stop, Israel needs to stop invading, occupying, and massacring its neighbors. People
So,
in your neighborhood are not going to like you if you continue to kill their families and steal their homes and land. It's really basic.
So
you
let's
guys. Come
turn
on.
to Gaza. Let's turn to Gaza. In 2005, every single Israeli, dead and alive, they actually dug up the bodies. Every single Israeli left Gaza. Gaza could have become the Singapore of the Mediterranean. There was not an occupation. There was not a single soldier. And then Hamas took over and fired 6,000 rockets in a very short period of time. If Gaza had just decided to use all the money they got from Europe, built a beautiful port, there could be peace. But Hamas decided to invade Israel, attack Israel, culminating on October 7th. But for years, there were tens of thousands of rockets that came in. Of course, Israel's going to defend itself. You say Hezbollah's never invaded Israel. Thousands of rockets. They have 100,000 rockets aimed at Israel's midsection. An invasion doesn't require a troop. It requires a rocket. So Israel has been defending itself from the day it came into existence in 1948. There could have been a wonderful Palestinian state and a tiny little Israeli state. And all the Arab countries decided to conduct a genocidal war to destroy the nation state of the Jewish people. And Israel's been fighting for its very survival ever since. So let's get real here.
Okay,
If Israel laid down his arms, there would be genocide.
Okay, let
if
me
the
ask-
Arabs laid down their arms, there would be peace.
Okay, let me.
Good evening from Beirut, where just a few hours ago, huge plumes of smoke could be seen rising through the city after a series of loud explosions. Israel says that it was targeting the headquarters of Hezbollah and its leader Hassan Nasrallah. But tonight, it's not clear whether he was in the buildings that were hit or whether he's alive or dead. The initial death toll from the explosion is that 2 people were killed, but that is expected to rise. We're told that 70 injuries have been reported so far. And just in the last hour, the IDF has issued warnings for people living in certain parts of those southern suburbs to evacuate their homes, which suggests that more strikes may be due overnight. Well, Iran, which backs Hezbollah, has called the attack on the capital in those southern suburbs of Dahir a dangerous, game-changing escalation. In just a moment, we'll speak to our international editor, Jeremy Bowen, who will give us the latest on what's happened and look ahead to what this could mean for escalating tensions in the region. But first, Hugo Bashega reports from the area close to the attack.
Scenes of war in Beirut. Hezbollah's conflict with Israel returning to its stronghold of Tahrir, with a series of massive explosions and an escalation with unpredictable consequences. An attack so powerful it was seen and heard across the city. Lebanon now on the brink of another war. Chaos on the streets, and here is what they're running from. Tahrir in southern Beirut, now looking like Gaza. But amid so much destruction, jubilation, 2 children rescued from the rubble alive. Hezbollah's backers, Iran, say this strike marks a dangerous game-changing escalation in the conflict. For Israel, it's a strike targeting the heart of Hezbollah's operations.
Moments ago, the Israel Defense Forces carried out a precise strike on the central headquarters of the Hezbollah terror organization that served as the epicenter of Hezbollah's terror. Hezbollah's central headquarters was intentionally built under residential buildings in the heart of the Dakhia in Beirut, as part of Hezbollah's strategy of using Lebanese people as human shields.
This was apparently the target, one of Israel's main enemies. Hezbollah's longtime and powerful leader, Hassan Nasrallah, seen here for the last time a week ago. Israel says it is still checking whether he was hit and remains alive. Hezbollah and Iran say reports he's dead are not true. This is one of the roads leading to Tahrir. We tried to get out of the car, but we were stopped by a group of men. There is chaos, there is tension. We've seen crowds gathered by the road with rucksacks and bags, apparently trying to leave Tahrir. Minutes before the attack, the Israeli Prime Minister finished a speech at the United Nations. Benjamin Netanyahu said his country wanted peace, but had no choice but to fight its enemies. Hours later, there was some response from Hezbollah in the way of dozens of rockets on northern Israel. One hit this building in the town of Sfat. For almost a year, there has been concern that something like this could spark a wider regional conflict. Tonight, there are 2 unanswered questions: whether Hassan Nasrallah is still alive, and if the Middle East will be engulfed by war. Hugo Bashega, BBC News, Beirut.
Beirut is tonight reeling from the impact of a massive Israeli attack on the headquarters of the militant group Hezbollah. The Lebanese capital was hit by a wave of missiles this afternoon in one of the most dangerous escalations in the Middle East to date. According to reports in Israel, the attack was aimed at the Hezbollah leader Hassan Nasrallah. His fate is not yet known, but the scale of destruction means the casualty rate is likely to be high. The airstrikes came just hours after Benjamin Netanyahu had finished a defiant speech at the UN, in which he described the threat posed by Hezbollah as intolerable. He had already signed off on the attack in a New York hotel room before coming to the chamber. It may be Israel's most incendiary act of the past 12 months, described by Iran tonight as a game-changing escalation.
A bombardment on Beirut. As the sun set, the explosions rang out. An ominous indication of escalation. In the last few minutes, there has been a massive bombardment here on Beirut. It is by far the biggest attack on this country since the end of the war in 2006. The scale of the attack suggested a target of huge significance. Multi-story buildings you've
Israel tonight claimed to have killed Hezbollah leader Hassan Nasrallah in a huge targeted strike on his underground bunker. An enormous strike levelled 6 buildings above the 64-year-old terror group chief's underground command post in the Dahia suburb of the Lebanese capital, Beirut. Initial reports from the bearded Islamist firebrand's aides suggested he'd escaped the huge explosion, said to be the biggest attack since last year's October the 7th outrages. But Israeli Defense Forces now say that initial assessments indicate that their Lebanese-based arch-enemy's leader had been eliminated. Israeli officials said there were indications Nasrallah was inside a compound during last night's massive attack and could not possibly have survived. But Israeli Prime Minister was reported to have replied with the word wait when asked by heads of US Jewish organisations if the assassination attempt had succeeded. Nasrallah led Iran-backed Hezbollah during the last war with Israel in 2006 and has been a thorn in his enemy's side ever since. He oversaw a massive program of rebuilding the group's military machine to become the most heavily armed terror group on earth. His assassination attempt comes days after he pledged to carry on fighting Israel with his group's 150,000 missiles and drones and tens of thousands of battle-hardened troops. US sources later reported that the target of the massive strike was Nasrallah, but it remained unclear whether he was in the bunker under the Blitz buildings. A string of assassinations in recent days had left him virtually alone at the top of Hezbollah's terror tree. Israeli war jets had earlier hammered more than 220 targets across Lebanon and also killed 5 Syrian soldiers manning a military post on the Lebanese border. The conflict expanded as efforts to broker a peace deal between Israel and the Lebanese terror group foundered. Nick Parker for The Sun in Haifa, Israel.
That will be taken lightly, and I think that that will be the last resort. If Hezbollah fails to make the right decision, if they decide to continue to fight and fire rockets at Israel and continue to deny Israelis from being safe in their homes, then
okay, can I finally ask you, Mr. Cornicus, about the strong international criticism there is about the deaths of civilians? The deadliest day in Lebanon since 1990 and the end of the Civil War, where we not only saw hundreds killed, we saw 50 children killed the other day in Lebanon, who are not obviously combatants. These strikes are not surgical that are going into Lebanon at the moment. What does Israel say, or how does the IDF feel about the fact that there is such a high civilian death rate?
Yeah, any loss of life, civilian life, is regrettable. And I say that with full meaning and with sympathy towards families and children and people who aren't supposed to die, who are in the wrong place at the wrong time, full stop. I think that what we need to be mindful here is on one side, the IDF is doing really everything it can in order to hit only military targets. But on the other hand, it's really an extremely complicated situation where there are high-grade explosives inside Lebanese houses, where Hezbollah is using Lebanese houses to store their weapons, to store their missiles. There's only one way to take them out, and that is by attacking them. That's also why the IDF issued a 2-hour warning, emergency warning for Lebanese in certain areas who know that Hezbollah has weapons in their houses to evacuate those houses in order to be safer. And to be frank, I think that as long as this goes forward, we will see Israeli civilian casualties as a result of direct Hezbollah rocket fire towards Israeli cities. And unfortunately, we will see Lebanese civilian casualties because Hezbollah uses them as human shields.
Mr. Cornicus, thank you very much.
To Tel Aviv now, where I'm joined by Ori Yishasha from Israel's Defense and Security Forum. I apologize if I didn't get your last name right there, Or. What is the situation on the ground right now? Can you give us a sense?
Hi there, and thanks for having me. Well, Israelis look up to the north and they see over 10,000 Hezbollah rockets, missiles, and drones fire at them, many of them manufactured by Iran, that have been terrorizing Israeli residents for almost a year now. So needless to say, Israel finally broke the stalemate and very rightfully conducted a series of operations. We saw the amazing Beeper operation. We saw how the vast majority of the Hezbollah leadership was eliminated, and Hezbollah is now discombobulated and feeling disarray. That's exactly what both Israelis and Lebanese should be feeling right now. Gracious for Hezbollah to be in this situation. I think we can't be neutral here. It's very simple. Israel is a democracy fighting a terrorist organization. I don't see any reason to pressure Israel, the party that was attacked, to suddenly de-escalate. We need to crush this enemy organization, this terrorist organization, until they cease to attack Israeli civilians.
It must blow your mind far more than it blows my mind, or in terms of international reaction to, in any other situation with any other country or people, the world would embrace you and help you and cry for you. But when it comes to Israel and the Jewish community, it doesn't happen.
No, and I think the Western world is hopelessly trying to be the honest broker between a partner in the Middle East, a vibrant democracy, and a terror group. And President Macron just the other day said that, well, we urge both Israel and Hezbollah to cease the fire. Both Israel and Hezbollah. It's a bit like urging both the United States and Al Qaeda to cease the fire.
Yeah.
We already had a country controlled by a terror group called Afghanistan, a terror group called the Taliban, and now we have Lebanon, who was taken over by Iran and its proxy Hezbollah. We can't be neutral. It's quite shocking, actually, for Israelis to see this stabbing in the back while President Macron and other Western officials go on the UN podium and urge Israel to stop defending itself. And without even mentioning Hezbollah by name in one other speech, pretending as if it's a confrontation between Israel and Lebanon, I think it's just shocking. It shows how Western democracies would rather throw their ally under the bus, provided they sort of buy silence for themselves for a bit of.
No, absolutely. And the people they're trying to buy silence from, seriously, why would you want them to support you, honestly? I've got to ask you, you mentioned the condition of Hezbollah at the moment. What is left? How potent are they? What kind of a threat do they still pose to Israel, given how effective the walkie-talkie and the pager attacks were?
Oh, you're absolutely right. It was very effective, but Hezbollah still maintains an extremely substantial firepower over Israel. Many of his militants are incapacitated right now, but you have to remember, Hezbollah was built by Iran not for decoration. Over 150,000 missiles directed exactly at our head right here in Tel Aviv. We woke up this morning by a siren alert by a missile fired by the Houthis in Yemen, an Iranian missile fired from the south. It was like, 4 hours ago. We all ran to the shelters. So the danger is present, but I do think that Hezbollah's capabilities were diminished. I just think we need to speak about this topic in a very clear manner. We have a terror group that is attacking Israel, a democratic country. Lebanese people, and I'm half Lebanese myself, Aaron, I would love Lebanese people to be freed from this terror group controlled by Iran. I just hope we can all get there someday.
I'm glad you brought that up. I really am. I'd love to know, from your perspective, how people in Lebanon feel about Hezbollah.
Well, I'm tracking social media in Arabic by these people, and I can tell their frustration, not by Israel, by Hezbollah. They have actually, they have campaigns around the streets that say, Lebanon la turid al-harb, Lebanon doesn't want war. They accuse Hezbollah for dragging their country into war they're not interested in, and you've got hundreds of thousands of Lebanese fleeing north. If you check Google Maps, you see all the traffic jams of people fleeing to their lives, and the Israeli military sends them SMS messages and taking over their radio, telling them, please evacuate for the sake of your own lives. I think they appreciate what Israel is doing. I also think, however, that they need to take responsibility over themselves and get rid of this terror group from within, so perhaps one day Israelis and Lebanese can live in peace.
Your experience in this space, clearly, how do you see this playing out? Do you see this escalating into a major conflict?
Look, it's all up to Iran. I think on October 7, before October 7, we had a ceasefire, and then Iran sent Hamas to slaughter Israeli civilians and foreigners in the south, in the October 7 massacre, and then the following day Hezbollah joined, and then on April 14, Iran fired 350 missiles and drones at Israel, and the Houthis in Yemen keep firing. So, it's a multi-front war. I just wish, we allow the playing field and look at these things honestly, speak the truth about this issue. I just heard the claim that over 40,000 Palestinians Palestinians were killed in Gaza. These are Hamas figures. I know that they are legitimized by the United Nations, giving them a stamp, including them in UN reports. But if you check the little footnote, they says the Gaza Ministry of Health. So basically, we are parroting Hamas propaganda unwillingly. We just need to be very honest about these issues. Israel is conducting very precision strikes and fighting on behalf of the Western world.
No, I agree with you. And that's not just a commentator, or that is our foreign minister referencing those numbers as fact. Thank you so very much for your time. We're thinking of you. Really appreciate it.